Welcome to the Flight Club Podcast, a woman's guide to leaning out. We give you a behind-the-scenes look at business launch and growth through the stories of successful female entrepreneurs. Here's your host, Felina Hansen, founder and CEO of Hera Hub.
Hello and welcome. I am really looking forward to my conversation today with Hera Flocken. She is a new transplant to San Diego, relatively new. So I'm excited to dive in to what brought her all the way across the country from Washington, D.C. to San Diego. She, after working for 6 years of learning what worked and what didn't at various in-house communication roles there in Washington, D.C., Hera left the swamp, love it, and took that East Coast approach to her home in the best of the West, so to speak. So I'm excited to have her in San Diego. She is a communications genius, I will say, an expert, if you will. Her company is SLH Communications, which is not her initials. It stands for Sound Like a Human, which is critically important in communication. So welcome to the show today, Hera.
Thank you, Felina. Thanks for having me. Really, really happy to be here.
Wonderful. Well, let's dive in. Take us back. You're originally from the East Coast. Is that right? Are you originally from DC?
No, I'm actually originally from Southern California. I grew up in Orange County, and then I went all the way up to LA for college. I went to I went to Occidental College in LA. It's like the little tiny liberal arts college in the hipster neighborhood of Eagle Rock in East LA. Barack Obama went there for 2 years, but then he transferred to Columbia, but we don't talk about that. So I went to Oxy for college for 4 years. I did a degree in English and comparative literary studies, did a minor in theater. I studied abroad. I did drama school for a semester in London. I joke around that, all of my other friends went to Spain and partied and slept till 3 p.m. I was in classes 6 days a week, 8 hours a day. It was like fame, but with British people. So that was my college experience. And honestly, I thought I was going to go into academia. That was my goal. So what I did, though, was I wanted to have some fun credentials to really give myself an edge for applying to PhD programs back in the U.S. I really wanted to do a humanities PhD of some kind, something like English Lit, critical theory, gender studies, some mishmash of all of those, because that's the stuff I like to read and study. So I did a master's at University of Edinburgh in Scotland. So, I went all of an hour and a half away for college, and then I went a very, very long way for grad school. And Edinburgh was wonderful. I did a master's in a program called Literature and Modernity, which was great, and I loved it. And I had so many great experiences in Edinburgh, including my first brush with doing publicity in a professional context. One of my other big passions is comedy. I have done sketch and stand-up and improv comedy, and I got into the Edinburgh student sketch comedy group that performed at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival every summer. And so I spent that summer writing my thesis and doing sketch comedy in a free comedy show in the upstairs room of a really dirty pub. And I was the publicity director because nobody else wanted to do it. So it was my job to basically coordinate getting those flyers designed, maybe going to the little like media blitz day that they had with all the reviewers that come in, and basically like standing in line at tables and giving a 1-minute pitch to reporters of why they should come review this show. I think I got like one blogger to come in and review the show. And of course, I was in the show and writing it and rehearsing it and performing it. And, of course, writing a thesis and working in a restaurant for actual money. So it was a really interesting, sleepless time of my life. And I loved every minute of it. So after Edinburgh, I stayed as long as my well, after I got my degree, after I passed and all that, I stayed in Edinburgh as long as my visa would allow. And then I came back to the States and was just kind of like, well, now what?
The defining moment.
Yeah. I basically, I put off that, post-college now what moment by just doing a master's degree. and then I had it anyway. But I'd meant to go and apply for PhD programs, and I was going to find whatever job I could in the meantime. Conveniently, I graduated straight into peak recession. And so I found back home, and it was like, well, there's not a lot of, I don't know what I'm going to do, and there's not even that many jobs around to be had, but I will do my best to figure it out. So what ended up happening was, I spent about a month living at home and just applying for whatever technical writing, anything, admin assistant, like anything vaguely word related, basically, that I could think of. And finally, one of my friends from grad school, actually, who moved back to the Washington, D.C. area, she gave my resume to her boss, and her boss said, hey, this lady sounds cool. I'll interview you. And so I flew cross country to interview for my very first job in DC, which was the very exciting role of basically copy editor of financial statements for a big audit firm during tax season. That was my first job out of school.
Well, you just say the word audit and, people start to cringe, right? And so the fact that I didn't even know there was such a thing as a copy editor for financial statements. Can you explain that a little bit more? I mean, I guess, because I'm thinking numbers, right?
If I can even, basically my job was to make sure that all the documents looked right, that all the, numbers basically added up, that all the commas were in the right place, that the client's name was spelled right, stuff like that. And, go back and forth with the accountants to make sure that everything looked right. And it was basically my job to make sure that the statements that they put out were, I don't know, that they look like everybody had been paying attention, basically.
Okay.
So, and that was, and because it was tax season, it was for long hours, and everybody thought I was crazy moving cross country for, just any job. But I was climbing the walls. I really just wanted a job, any job. And, something to feel productive while I was still, applying for PhDs and things. And so I took this job. Thankfully, another friend of mine, her mom said, hey, well, her brother is at college. You can sleep in his bedroom for while you're in DC. So I ended up, so I spent 3 months, my first 3-4 months in DC were spent sleeping in my friend's mom's basement, essentially, which was free. It was very nice. And I had the most hellacious commute. But again, that's what you do for free rent. And I was working really, really long hours. But I will say I was in the best shape of my life, because I did this thing where I would drive in with my friend, take my bike, take it apart, put it in the trunk of her car, and then, because she worked down the street from me, and then I'd get out, I'd, reassemble the bike, lock it back up, work really late, and then you couldn't take your bike on the DC Metro until after rush hour, basically, and that was after 7 p.m. So I'd work until at least 6 or 7 p.m., and then I'd just go to the gym until I knew that the Metro would be not crowded and I could get my bike on there. And then I would, get on the bike and get on the Metro with my bike, and then ride 3.5 miles back to my room in the basement from the Metro station.
So wait a minute. We have to know, what time of year was this?
Oh, I moved out there in January.
Oh, cold. As a California girl to girl here.
Californian. Oh, it was a shock. I was like, wait, what do you mean I have to dress for the weather? What? So that was my introduction to DC. And then so right around this time I was learning, okay, I am not getting into a lot of PhD programs. Oh, and also this job is seasonal and they're not going to hire me back. What am I going to do? I wanted to give DC a try, so I applied for another job at this now defunct nonprofit called the Center for Interfaith Action on Global Poverty. And, because I was always really passionate about gender issues, I got accepted, and I was their fellow for women and girl programs, which, I was basically an intern, but, it was something, and, I found, an actual roommate situation. I moved into a big old crumbling row house in DC, and then, and I worked, and then I also ended up taking on a kind of dual communications and nonprofit program kind of role once I got promoted up. And it was, it was, again, another interesting time in my life. Like I learned a lot about, just like the nonprofit sphere and foreign aid and just kind of how DC works, and also, basic communication stuff that I just had to figure out a lot of on my own because it was a very small team. Fun fact about this office, we operated out of a little house on the grounds of the Washington National Cathedral.
Awesome.
Yeah. But as nonprofits do, it folded. And I found myself about a year after I moved to DC, about to be unemployed, and still, I decided, I was going to give the PhD application thing another go. So I'd started, with a round of those. So around that time, those 3 months, I was between jobs for 3 months. I walked dogs. I applied for jobs. I, did PhD application interviews, what have you. And then finally, at one point, I did get into a program. I got into the University of Maryland's Gender Studies PhD program. And at the same time, I got a job offer for a social media manager position at another nonprofit. And, so I was like, oh my gosh, I'm totally going to just take this job for a little bit. And then I'm just going to, start this PhD program in the fall, like, something like that. And then I realized that the PhD life maybe wasn't what I wanted for myself at that particular moment in time, because while I was one of 8 people that had been accepted to that PhD cohort, there were only funding slots for 3. And they basically made us compete for funding by bringing us in for like this day of interviews and presentations and stuff that I essentially called the funding Hunger Games, because that's what it felt like. Like one girl cried at one point because she was so stressed out. And then I found out that, 3 funding slots for 8 accepted members of this potential PhD cohort. I was number 4. I could have gone my whole life without learning that. But, I was talking to the woman who was supposed to be my advisor about it, and I told her what I had going on. And she said, take the job. You don't want this life.
Oh, wow.
And, I was like, yikes. Okay. Yes, ma'am. And so I took the job, and that was, again, a boot camp in social media, digital communications, just kind of learning even a bit more how DC worked and especially the nonprofit sphere and even a bit of the government sphere. And, that was also a bit of a crash course in media relations for me too, because I took on a lot of media relations stuff. Again, slightly larger nonprofit, small staff, so everybody has to wear a lot of hats. After about a year and a half and change of that, I applied for a job at Atlantic Media, the parent company of magazines like The Atlantic and National Journal, and at the time, Quartz. I mean, they just sold Quartz, but, it was a big name. I was not on those big names. I was the director of communications for their, the quote unquote boring brands, the digital publications focused on government and defense and cybersecurity. This was all before this kind of thing was super sexy, right? I was in charge of basically making sure that these stories and reporters and events coming out of these publications got, more national media attention. And that was just, again, another crash course. Like, I feel like every single in-house job I had in DC was a crash course on something.
Sounds like it.
So, So, again, more late hours, but again, lots of introductions, like lots of contacts that I still have today came from that job. A lot of, producers and reporters, and, and what the great thing one thing I hope every PR person can do at some point is work alongside reporters, because they will tell you exactly what they do and don't want in a pitch. I often got called over by the reporters that I worked with, and they would point to an email from some PR person on their screen and say, see that? Don't ever do that.
Don't do that.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh.
So, I mean, that was some of the best. I mean, I didn't formally study PR. Like, there were lots of academic programs to do so, but that was some of the best training I could have gotten, honestly.
Yeah.
And so that was a really formative career period for me. But eventually, you know, I wanted to kind of take things in a little bit of a different direction. I have always, you know, valued, basically, I do words. I value, you know, helping people sound like the best versions of themselves and clearly communicate their ideas. So I wanted to look for something a bit more writing intensive. And so when an opportunity came up, this was actually my last in-house job at the U.S. Travel Association to be their editorial manager. I was like, oh my God, I got to go after this. You know, it was an interesting leap to make from, you know, defense, government, cyber to travel. But, you know, I guess, you know, in a way it was kind of meant to be. And fun fact, my grandparents actually ran a travel agency for a bit. That was a fun tidbit to throw on my cover letter there. Yeah. So it's in the family. So So I joined up there, and that is, again, you know, that was just a crash course. You know, we have a repeating theme here of learning how to just churn out content quickly, and but also make sure that it's high quality, and, you know, kind of really capture someone's voice, again, very quickly, and, you know, get smart on topics, you know, quickly enough to be able to write intelligently about them, which is what I, you know, I was, you know, I can talk to you all day now about, you know, airline taxes and, you know, infrastructure funding, you know, because these are all like the big issues related to travel and tourism. So that's, but, you know, the whole time I'm in DC, I'm thinking, I don't want to be here forever. I don't want to be, I didn't want to wake up in my 40s living in, you know, a suburb of DC and doing the same commute that everybody else did and being like, wow, I never explored or lived anywhere else. I wanted to live on the West Coast again at some point in my life. And my boyfriend, who I moved out here with, actually, I met him in DC, and we've been together for going on 6 years now. He is a New Yorker who lived in DC for 11 years. So the West Coast was this abstract idea, I think. I don't think he thought that people could have lives and jobs here. We had a conversation once where I was like, what do you think we do? Surf all day?
Yeah, that's most. But I got that a lot from folks on the East Coast. Yes.
Oh yeah. But then, so we visited San Diego a couple times, and he really liked it. And I, you know, was like, oh, yeah, I could live here. I could, if this is a West Coast city we can both agree on, yeah, I could try this out. I was, you know, I tell my East Coast friends that San Diego is what would happen if LA took a deep breath, a giant chill pill, ate a burrito, and then took a nap.
Well said. Yes.
That's the general vibe. Yeah, but I also I liked that there was, you know, this very San Diego has a very academic presence as well, and, you know, there's that big military presence. So it's basically DC but with better weather in a lot of ways. So so he got a job at UC San Diego, and that precipitated us moving out here. We packed up all of our stuff. Asked me how to move cross country on the cheap. I, you know, picked up some very interesting tricks, and then we packed up the rest into my little Honda Accord and drove cross country in late October of last year. And then we got out here. I worked remotely for my old in-house job, and then they had to transition me out because they didn't, you know, they wanted someone full-time in-house. And that was another, oh, now what moment for me. The second in my life. And I thought, you know, I had thought for a while that I was going to be, you know, I thought for a while, you know, maybe I should try going out on my own at some point. I'd kicked it around in the back of my head. But, you know, it really started up when I was at my last job, thinking maybe I could do this for people on a freelance basis. Maybe I could, you know, pick up some clients and make a business out of this. But I didn't think it would happen so soon. What ended up happening was I got out here. I do what I feel like I do best. I just cold emailed and networked people and joined the local chapter of the Public Relations Society of America, and just, you know, saw who I could meet and where they could point me. And I ended up getting more and better offers for contract work than I did for anything in-house. And it got to a point around January, I'd say January 2018, where I thought, I should just go legit with this. I should build a business around the clients I have. So I got the LLC, I set everything up, and I have been operating it officially as SLH Communications since February.
Awesome. Congratulations. Yeah. And
Thank you.
I was excited to meet you just a few months ago at an event.
Yeah.
And now have you in the Hera Hub community. So definitely excited to, get to know your business a little bit better as well. Sarah, talk about the types of clients, types of projects you've been working on this year.
Yeah, it's been a very interesting variety, actually. So currently, I'll work backwards. Currently, I subcontract for one PR firm in town who that's been one of my clients since the beginning. I met them at a PRSA holiday event in December 2017, and we hit it off and we liked each other, and they started having me help out with national media for one of their clients, and I've been doing that for a while, and they're lovely to work with. I also subcontract with an ad agency in town doing a variety of things for them. I write proposals, which nobody likes, but I like, I guess, a little more.
That's great.
I also help with PR and outreach for a lot of their advertising clients. And some of those include government agencies, big nonprofits, hospital in one case, community colleges in the area. So, I've been getting an education in a lot of, different industries around here. It's been a good way to get to know kind of like the local economy a bit. And I've also been working recently with the San Diego County Taxpayers Association. It's been reminding me of DC in a lot of ways.
Coming back to your audit work.
Yeah. It's combining a lot of my old worlds for sure. And then before, I worked with a casino. I've done some work for a group in LA that, has a DC office that I used to work with at my old job, doing some work for travel and tourism clients of theirs. I actually did my old job on a contract basis remotely for a few months into 2018, and also did some work for my old employer on this conference that they put on every year in another capacity. I have done speech writing for the head of a foundation in Las Vegas. Oh my goodness, running through everything.
Wow, you've completed a lot of projects in the course of this last year. Let me ask you a question, Sarah, because for, a good number of entrepreneurs like yourself who are working on a variety of projects, different topics, different types of clients. Do you have a personal system or software that works for you to kind of keep all this organized?
Well, as far as, so one thing that is very interesting is everyone wants me to track my time differently. Everyone has their own system for how they want me to track my time. Like one client wants me to put everything in something called Excello. Another client wants me to put everything in something called Harvest. But I just, to keep everything centralized, I have an app that I used called Hours. It's free. It's on my phone, and I can just like hit timers between various projects, and it just kind of, that's how I keep things organized on my end. And I refer to that when I'm going in and filling out time for everyone else. I also have what I call my living, breathing to-do list. It's in the form of a Google Doc in an email, basically, that I constantly have updated. I have, every client that I have ever worked on in there, and, a to-do list organized in order by, basically, I set deadlines for myself. I give myself due dates for everything. And that is kind of like how I organize things a little bit there. Honestly, I would, organizing my time has been the biggest challenge in all of this, and I am always open for new ways to help me do that. One big accomplishment recently, though, is a fellow Hera Hub member. I'm going to shout out to her, Chiara Camarata of Optimized. She set me up in QuickBooks.
Yay!
Yay! I met her the very first day I went to anything at Hera Hub, and we talked for a bit. I, helped her out with one client of hers, and then she set me up. I hired her to set me up in QuickBooks and get me started doing my bookkeeping properly. And I will be doing all of my invoicing out of there starting next calendar year.
Awesome. I love it. Yeah, it's one of those things where you ask and you find folks that are working in a similar way. There's another app that I'll send to you. Melissa Glaze, who worked and ran Hera Hub Mission Valley for several years and now is on the East Coast. She's back on the East Coast for a little bit. She has suggested an app, a platform, I guess is probably the better way to say it, called Dubsado, Dubsado.
I've heard of them, yeah.
Yeah, so it's like an all-in-one, they call it a CRM for creative professionals, but it looks like it's much more than that. So I'll tag you on that, Sarah, and that might be one to look at too, because I think that, you alluded to that as well. The challenge is if you're working in numerous different platforms and there's no syncing, across platforms, that can be challenging. So,
oh yeah,
good stuff. Well, as we wrap up our conversation, Sarah, what's next? What's on the horizon for your business over the next year or so? What are you looking forward to?
Well, I'm looking forward to, I think I said this out loud at the Hera Hub Thanksgiving. It was good for me to say this out loud. I want to focus, I have two sides of my house in my business, if you will, the media relations, strict PR side, and a bit more of the writing intensive, editorial content side. I want to try and focus on getting more clients in the editorial content arena. I love doing media relations for the clients that I do that for, and I've learned so much this year about that, but I really want to get back to my roots of being, your guru for editorial content that makes you sound like a human. I also want to try and branch out more into, really tap more into my travel and tourism skills because, hello, San Diego. I mean, it's a big driver of the economy here, and I want to, I'm trying to kind of make a few more inroads there and see who I can work with in that direction.
Fantastic. I love it. And if our listeners want to get in touch with you, Sarah, what's the best way for them to do that?
Sure. You can do you can contact me through my website, slhcommunications.co. My web designer told me .co is the way of the future, so that's why we went with that instead of .com. Okay. Or you can just email me, Sarah, SARAH, at slhcommunications.co.
Wonderful. Awesome. Thanks for your time, Sarah.
Thank you, Felina.
Thank you for joining this week's episode of Flight Club, sponsored by Hera Hub. We look forward to sharing more success stories with you soon.